Well, appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's certainly an honor to be asked to talk for foundations in terms of how they fit into this new world of social investing and social innovation. I would say, however, I cannot speak for foundations because, as they've often said, if you've seen one foundation, you've seen one foundation. They're a very lovable but quirky set of organizations. But I can speak from the perspective of having worked through our network with hundreds of foundations across the country, foundations of all types and sizes, from small family foundations, community foundations, our larger major leading foundations, that are all interested in learning ways to increase their impact. Particularly in these times. I think the foundations just are very much aware that what we've done up until now, what we're doing now, is simply not going to be enough to rise to the challenges that we face. And that's particularly true as we see the reduction in support in the public sector. So moving ahead, they're looking for solutions that go beyond grants alone. It's hard to build, particularly hard to build, solutions at scale, one grant at a time, or even through increased contributions year after year. Employing business principles such as investment strategies are ways that we can bring positive things to a greater scale and have them reach more people. So the PRI Makers Network and our companion organization, More for Mission, is all about helping foundations think through ways that they can start to use all their full range of tools available to them and a much wider extent of their assets in order to create impact. And the good news is that more foundations are increasingly interested in. As some of the charts that you were given today, there's a great deal of interest in foundations in what's called mission investing, meaning making investments that are going to generate a social return as well as a financial return. If that financial return is primarily principal with perhaps a smaller, lower than market rate level of financial return, that's considered a program-related investment. It's a great tool for foundations when it's appropriate to use, because when the money comes back, they get to reuse it and recycle it into new causes. But we also have mission rate investing, which seeks to say, how can we use our investments that sit within our endowments and put them in investments that are going to create both a social and a competitive financial return that will do good for the community as well as sustain our endowment in accordance with our responsibilities as trustees. It's starting to look at, we know what we do with the 5% of funds each year in terms of supporting specific programs and philanthropic objectives. Now they're looking at, are there ways to mobilize that other 95%? And that's significant indeed. Foundations have been doing this for a while. They're doing it more now. There's greater interest, but still it's a relatively small amount of foundations that are involved and a relatively small amount of their resources. But it has great effect. Putting the right tool through the right job makes a difference. Let me just give you one example. The High Point housing project is about a mile from my home in West Seattle, Washington. It's kind of your typical low-income housing project built in the 50s with all the attendant problems. About 5 years ago, it was through the work of the enterprise community partners in concert with the Seattle Housing Authority. It was torn down and the place was rebuilt with beautifully designed homes that create a much higher quality of life. It's a mixed income community. It's a great place to live. It's certainly a much safer place to live than it was previously. But with the input, and it was built primarily on public dollars, but with the input of philanthropic investments, both grants and PRIs, they were able to construct the new High Point using sustainable practices. So they used non-toxic materials, they used energy-efficient systems, they used better filtration systems, and what they've created has a multiple impact. Not only much improved types of housing, it created a community that's a real attraction for the surrounding community, but also by employing the energy efficiency and sustainable building strategies, it made it a place that's much less expensive to live on a monthly basis now and forever, which will be a benefit to the residents. But also in creating that, they set a standard for themselves in terms of building and construction that has since been adopted by the state of Washington as a policy, so that any new publicly financed facilities with state money must meet those levels of those standards. That's had another impact. That's created and expanded the market for sustainable materials, for new products and services, for the green economy, for new job opportunities in that sector. Now, that's a lot of return for a relatively limited amount of philanthropic dollars. But there was one more impact. They didn't necessarily promise anybody, but it happened. Based on a study they did a year after the families moved in, they noted that of the children living there with asthma, and there were many, as there are in many of our low-income communities, the trips to the emergency room in the next year were reduced by 43%. Tremendous impact on those children, those families, and tremendous savings in terms of health costs to the community at large. Another very quick example were the foundations that invested in a group called Revolution Foods, which had the idea that we should find a way, as a business proposition, to bring healthy, locally grown produce to children through the school lunch program. Now, this is a great idea, and everybody loved it, but very few investors would think that this is going to be easy money and may have a hard time justifying that. But foundations, it turns out, have the option not only to make loans, to do other types of financing, they can make equity investments. And they joined with venture capitalists to support Revolution Foods. 5 years later, they're serving 120,000 meals per day in major school districts across the country. That's having a tremendous impact on the children in terms of their health, their attitudes, their ability to learn. And it was, in fact, rumored, I'm not sure it was substantiated, but at least one child apparently went home to her mother and said, "Could we have Brussels sprouts like we did at school?" Now, I think that's a miracle, so that in alone is worth it. So there was a comment today about, with new technology and the changing strategies, what is going to be the role of philanthropy? Dispensing money is always a good thing to do. Finding the right places in which to invest it is always the biggest challenge. But philanthropy has much more to do as well. Philanthropy has some unique capabilities that others don't have. For example, foundations and philanthropy in general are extremely good at seeding new ideas, at testing them and then shining a light on them, to doing the R&D and bringing attention to the promise of new developments. Philanthropy can also use its funds to attract commercial investors, other impact investors, as Amy suggested. They can get into a project early. They can absorb more risk. They can leverage additional dollars. They can match public dollars. And that's a role that can be very important, particularly as you're talking about addressing problems at scale. And philanthropy can also help be a participant in opening new markets, bringing in business or attracting or encouraging or supporting business in a variety of ways and generating new policies that may help deliver significant goods, services, and quality of life to overlooked communities, to marginalized communities. It may be something as simple as capitalizing grocery stores that will be willing to go into what we consider food deserts, inner cities in particular, where there's not access to good produce. It can be capitalizing, as it did, the microfinance industry that has transformed so many lives, particularly abroad. But again, through strategic investments, through using the full range of tools that are available to them, about some of whom they are just learning, but also by doing it in partnership, so that your cause as a philanthropist doesn't have to be about your unique area that you're going to take on, but how can you work together with other foundations, other sectors of investors, and certainly the public sector, as Representative Kander suggested, to make a difference in the lives of our communities here and abroad. And try to stretch it out 9 more seconds. No, I can't do it. Thank you.